Hi there. Welcome to the webinar, Heart to Heart with Christine Davis. Welcome, Chris. Welcome back.
Thank you. Hi.
Hi. So today we get to go and get some more great answers from Chris about the bird behavior and the bird-human bonds and all that great stuff that kind of tugs at your heart. That's why it's called Heart to Heart with Chris Davis. So let's see, Chris, we'll give people like a minute here to log in, make sure we get all of our people together. In the meantime, let's see, I'm trying to think of any questions I might have for you. Okay, so right now it is, well, it's sunny where I am, but it's supposed to rain later. I know that rain has a certain effect on birds sometimes, right? When they hear the rain outside, what would you expect, if it starts to rain in your area, or even like the vacuum sound? What do birds typically like?
Well, I think that sound is very primal to the birds that come from jungly places with lots of greenery and lots of rain, and they certainly get enthusiastic about it. And in Southern California, where I was originally from, we got very little rain anytime out during the spring or summer. Most of our rain would come in the winter. And but every once in a while we get a tropical rain that would come up in the summertime, and I had a big cage outside that I would set the birds in when this happened, and I would put like a couple of macaws in there at a time or whatever. And it was so cute because they bathe and they'd be all happy and make all kinds of racket, and just they thought the rain was just the best thing. So every once in a while I would put a sprinkler on and put it over them, take them outside and put it over them on a hot day, and they thought that was grand too. So I think it's a primal thing with them. It's not just you can have a hand-fed baby that gets excited about rain a lot. Yeah, I think that there's just something hardwired into them where they wow, a bath is really good.
Yeah, and I've heard stories how like sometimes even the sound of a vacuum cleaner for some birds, it's like makes them think of rain. The sound of the.
I think it's that steady kind of tempo, that type of sound, and I think it does. They just get thrilled by it.
Yeah, like jumping in their water dishes and stuff, right?
Yeah, no, it's really cute. They really do. And if they would see another one bathing, a lot of times they start bathing too, beforehand they're just kind of sitting there, and then one of them starts bathing and they're going, that's a good idea. And then all of a sudden you all go over and everybody's flopping around and there's water everywhere. But it's fun. But I think again, a primal aspect of them.
Yeah. Okay. So let's see. I think we got people logging in here. And if you're just joining us, you're at the Heart to Heart webinar with Chris Davis. Just a reminder that if you have a question, use the Q&A button. That way we can capture it to make sure that we can get to it at some time. Don't use the chat button, use the Q&A. And also, once again, we're going to be giving away a great product for one lucky winner, and that is going to be a bag of the tropical fruit pellets, as well as a Lafeber product of your bird's choice. So with that said, I think we're going to start off with some questions and answers with finches, the small little guys, the ones that sometimes we they might get overlooked as companions, but nonetheless they are very worthy of attention. So Chris, we had some questions that were sent to us from Denmark about their finch, correct?
Yes.
I'm going to see if I can screen share the video that he sent as well, and then as we're watching the video, we'll go over the questions. Let me see here.
I love the story of how he was drawn to this bird.
Yes. Okay, can you see that? Can we see that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Now, may I read the part where he's saying, this is his little goldfinch.
Yes.
He says, 1 year ago, it was a Sunday. I took free from work just to get to the bird market, where I had an appointment with a man who was one of the few Danish breeders of European goldfinches. When I came closer to the cages, all the goldfinches took a step back, as if the devil would be approaching. His bird was the only one that stood in the front and watched, looked into his eyes, fearless. He said, I had to take him. He'd chosen me. And so he said that he got 2 rapeseed branches today. He likes it very much. And that was like his birthday cake. And he said, he also gave him a birthday song. And he said in the last branch, he was keeping safe for Christmas. So this is him indulging in his favorite birthday and Christmas treat. And this is the little goldfinch that chose him. And where all the little birds split, and he just sort of walked through and said, I'm going home with you. And one of the things that I like to explain to people is that it's not just the hookbills that are intelligent. It's not just the hookbills that are wonderful companions. It's also the softbills can be wonderful companions and very intelligent. Even the little finches, it's how they're raised. If they're raised around people and then you talk to them a lot, they learn words, they learn what things mean. And they can be wonderful pets. We had a pet robin that could not be released back into the wild. She was an amazing pet. And she was an amazing companion, and she understood everything. In fact, one day she was on my keyboard. I was supposed to be writing an article for Bird Talk, the magazine, and I'm writing away, and she kept coming over, and she wanted attention, so she kept jumping on my hand. And I said, Emily, I said, no. I said, no. I said, you stay off of my hand. I said, I can't work the keys. She walks over to the keyboard and she started just jumping up and down on the keyboard. And, it was like, nanny, nanny, nanny. It was like, she made her point that I don't care. I need attention from you right now. And so even little finches, I've seen very intelligent and very interactive little finches that are the only bird of the house, and they've been raised by people and they're wonderful companions. So this is a goldfinch, and I thought it would be fun to answer his questions because of that. So go ahead if you can.
Okay.
Just take a drink.
Okay. So the first question is, do birds understand the human language? And if yes, which one? So he has a little backstory about his goldfinch, and he bought a Christmas tree for his free flying European goldfish about a year ago, and so initially he got ignored by him, and then one evening, he came home and the bird wasn't in this cage. He was on the tree, and he spent a lot of time on the tree. So he had just spoken out these words, and the words were, I bought this Christmas tree for you. Why don't you sleep there instead? And apparently it sounds like the little finch, and I wish I could pronounce his name. I'm going to try pronouncing the name, but if I mispronounce, forgive me. Ciaula? It's Ciaula with a little accent on the A. So apparently, he said, why don't you sleep on the tree? And the bird seemed to just, boop, I'm going to go sleep on the tree. So.
They do. If a bird has been raised around human beings, they pick up whatever language the people are talking or speaking. And I've known some birds that were bilingual, and they really do understand. I think also, and I know there'll be people that will say, well, science hasn't proved it. Well, that just means that they haven't proved it yet. But I think that they do get pictures and feelings from people. I think that we're electrical beings, they're electrical beings. I think that they have apparatus in their electrical field where they know what we're conveying to them. They can either feel it or see it or whatever, but it seems to be a primal thing that goes beyond interaction and learning of actual language. Now, that doesn't mean they can't learn language, they do, and they learn it and know it quite well. But I've seen where working with absolutely wild birds, one of the talks I'd given gave an example of that. We're working with absolutely wild birds, where in my mind, I was thinking about touching this bird on one side of its face. But I had my hands behind me completely, and I was holding the wrist, my hand like that behind me. And the bird when in my mind, my hand went to touch this macaw's face to groom him like another macaw, he screamed, and he actually jerked his head back and screamed as if my hand were there. And that proved to me and that this thing that I've seen in most, not just birds, most wild animals, and I've worked with a lot of them, lived with a lot of them in my life. With most wild animals, I've found this to be true, is they can pick up something from us, and you can call it telepathy, whatever. But I think that one day science will prove that it's there, and it's just another tool, but they can do it better than we can. Like a dog has better hearing and better sense of smell. So he does understand, and it doesn't matter what language you're speaking. If it's his language that you speak regularly around him, he will grow to know that language. I have seen situations, we were talking about it earlier, about where when we had a lot of imported birds coming in and a lot of smuggled birds coming in, the ones that came from Mexico, a lot of times, even if they were very young babies, they just sort of sit around and look depressed until you started speaking to them in Spanish. And then if you spoke to them in Spanish, they brighten up and be kind of happy, like, okay, this is the language I was accustomed to. And somebody down there had been hand feeding them and talking to them in Spanish. And so once you did that, they were comfortable, and then they could convert over to English just like a child would. So when he was talking about the bird and telling about the tree, I don't know whether the bird saw the picture in his head. I don't know whether he understood the words from the man. It could be either one, but they do understand. And I've seen this with everything. I had an iguana that, if I told him don't do this, he'd stop, and if he felt like doing it, he'd do it like with a flair, like my Robin Emily did. But if it was like, oh, okay, if I said something was dangerous or whatever, he'd go, oh, okay. And he'd walk the other direction, like, all right, So there's an understanding that comes, I think they feel a lot of what we feel, because I've seen that working in with people with behavior problems with their birds. A lot of times the birds are responding to the person's problems. So yes, he's got a smart little guy, and he understood, but we don't know whether he understood the language.
Yeah.
I don't know whether the man said he speaks in German. I have a copy of this. He speaks in German to him. I don't know whether he knew German or if he just saw in his head what the man was conveying or felt it, however they respond.
Okay. So then his next question, which is
That's a short answer.
No. His next question was, do birds watch over humans? So, he says that he has his finch will come over and sit on one of the branches and until he falls asleep. He's watching over him, and he had a pigeon that did the same thing, that watched went on his high piece of furniture and just kind of watch over them.
Yeah, they do. They're flock animals. And so they go to a safe place, but they want to make sure he's the major person in that flock who will indicate if anything is problematic, if there's if there's any danger or whatever. But they're also, then they take the highest, safest spot, but they want to be there with the flock, because you might be sleeping if you're a member of the flock, but your buddy might say, oh, there's a problem, and everybody just takes off or whatever. So yes, what they're doing is very natural. And it doesn't matter, again, whether it's a big bird, little bird, soft bill, as long as it's a prey bird, it will behave in this way.
Okay. And then let's see, he had another question about how to tame a bird to step up onto a finger. His little goldfinch is not scared at him at all. And he come very close and he looks at him, sometimes curious, sometimes bored, sometimes suspicious, sometimes ignoring him. Sounds like a child sometimes. And some months ago, he tried to get him to step on his finger, and he did it to his surprise. So, and he'll be there for a little bit, and then he flies back to his branch. So I guess, even birds that you wouldn't expect to be fingered, step up trained and are accustomed, like a finch, is that something that you've seen, or, just?
Oh, definitely. The robin was the same way, but she'd sit on our hand, she'd sit on our shoulder. You know, you say, "Come here, Emily," and she'd fly down. And you know, sometimes she wanted to stand on your head if there was somebody strange in there or whatever. Again, she's going to the highest spot where she can go to safety, but she also is with you because you indicate further safety. You know, you'll be an indicator if there's anything wrong. And no, they do. I've known finches that will sit on tiny finches that will sit on your finger. I've known canaries. I mean, my gosh, canaries are often just little finger birds. People don't think of them as being that. They think of them just as being a songbird, but they actually, you know, they'll sit on your finger. They'll be absolutely tame. They're wonderful. Let me see. What was yeah, so I'm looking at the same questions in case somebody was wondering, because I just want to make sure that I covered everything. That's a very natural behavior, the watching over and all that. But then getting on the finger, now when we're going to that part, that's where successive approximation will help, except the bird has already accepted his finger. And one of the things he says in here is that the bird, he lets him kind of go wild in the house. And so the thing is, though, is that the bird understands that he's his primary flock member. He's the other member in his living arrangement, in his flock, is this man. Now, the bird did get on his finger, and he's just getting on when he chooses. And when you have a bird that you keep as, or any animal that you keep as another member of the family, then when you do, you can train them to go to your finger. Look, like he said, the bird likes rapeseed. I would save that as this little treat, and then say, you know, ask him to step on your finger, and then give him a couple little seeds. You know, don't give him a big, you know, people give him the seed thing, like, you know, it'd be like eating something the size of a pillow, but just give a couple of little seeds, and that's where he would get that little treat that he loves so much. And I think he would start coming to the man after doing that. You can actually use more stringent training rules, but in a friendship like this, I don't usually do that. I don't like training birds as much as I like teaching them, because when you teach a bird and it's a member of the family, you are given insight into their world. And I like to know who they are. I don't want them to become what I want them to be. There's certain rules, yes, that I want. We raise the kids the same way, where there were rules that you're polite, you're kind, there's, you know, you don't hit each other or anybody, and this type of thing. But from there, I like to see who they became, you know, as young women now. They're living amazing, wonderful lives because they're each doing what they want to do, and they're doing it well. And so the thing is that's with the animals, they've been my strongest teachers, because I've lived with them, and I've done training. I mean, I used to work at Universal Studios, all that, but this is different when it's a member of the family. And so I think that if he just saves a favorite treat, since it is saved usually for holidays or whatever, and he just gets a couple of those seeds he likes, that he knows that's the only way he's going to get it, or if there's something else he likes, like a type of bread or whatever, but he only gets that for hopping on his finger. And then letting him hop off when he wants to is fine, because he's a friend and he's getting it. And the bird will want to sit longer during those times that he's comfortable doing that. But when you have a bird that you're keeping somewhat with his wild behavior, which I used to do with my iguanas, you let them establish what's comfortable kind of for them too. And you come to a center place rather than having someone who is classically trained. You have someone who is just a member of the family, who, when you ask him to get on your finger, sometimes he doesn't want to. You know, okay, but he's not going to get his treat, and that's fine. You know, but and that's the way he's living with the bird now, with it flying around stuff. That's how I would train that bird to do that, is I would teach him, instead of actually formally training, just his favorite treat, and then don't have him stay for a long time. And in fact, as he stays longer, the man could go and put him back, so before he wants to leave. And then he'll start to stay on the man's finger longer. And this is where a little bit longer, the successive approximation then would be the man making the choice that when he's been on the finger for a while, and would you like to go back to your tree, you know, and put him on the tree or on a branch or on his toy, whatever he would like to do. So it's a different way of interacting with them, but it's really a wonderful and exciting way when you live like that, because you become one of them as much as they are one of you. It's a real
mutual respect.
yes, and learning. I learn from them all the time, you know. So yeah. Anyway.
So then, this is another fascinating question. Again, with the finch. So is singing a sign of well-being? Because he points out that people sing, but we don't necessarily sing when we're feeling ill. And wondering if birds. Is it the same for birds? Will they sing when they're not feeling that good? He also points out that his finch will sing in the middle of winter when it seems like all the other birds of his species don't. So what does that mean?
They're just, well, keep in mind his finch, even though his molting cycles and things will follow those of nature, he's not out in the cold. He's not having to go through the same events and situations that another bird would have to go through if it was wild. And so what happens is, in a situation like that, is that the bird sings when he's happy, and sometimes if there'll be other things that maybe in the spring he'll sing more for, like, to draw a mate or whatever, that type of thing, a courtship thing. But the thing is that, yes, sad birds, upset birds, they don't make happy sounds usually. There's that, like, beak grinding comfy sounds when they're going to sleep. It's so sweet. And when a bird's not comfortable, if they're not feeling well, what you'll notice is it's quiet. They're not grinding their beak anymore because they're just pooped. They just want to sleep. They're not feeling like, oh, I'm feeling good and cozy, I'm gonna sleep. And, so his bird's singing because it's happy, and it's happy being around him. The bird is loved. He has a good flock member who pays attention to him and who loves him back. And hey, if I were a birdie, I'd be singing too, in that environment, because he's being respected and loved.
That's good. Okay.
It sounds
nice.
like a charming relationship. I mean, an absolutely charming.
I know, especially with a little guy. That's adorable.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I have a question from. Let's see. Hang on one second. Okay. Wait, I have to scroll up here. Okay, I have a young Indian ringneck. This is from Angela. What tips do you have for touching the bird? My guy likes to hang out with me, but petting is not his favorite thing at all. He cringes when he sees my hand coming to pet him. So the big bad hand coming at him.
Hand monster. So one of the things that I used to teach people is if she can look up some, by the way, I have to say just very quickly, people always ask, what's a really good first bird or a good pet? What's one that would talk well, that's interesting, that's funny, whatever? I got to tell you, the ringnecks are so underestimated. They are amazing. They talk like crazy. They become very interactive with their people. They're funny. They're fun to have around. They're amazing birds. Anyway, one of the things is that I would teach people how to, they'd want to go and pet their bird like this. And I'd say, wait a minute, that's bigger than his head. And this is like saying, oh, I'm going to do your hair, and having somebody come up with some huge structure. And you're like, what? And so what you have to do is learn to look from the bird's perspective. Think, if I were this size, and I have a little head like this, and I'm only this, my body's only this long, how big would a hand look to me? And then also, we tend to approach them incorrectly where it becomes threatening. And what I would suggest is for this person to look for videos of maybe the birds in the wild where they're preening each other. Because what I found, the way I first invented the way that I used to work hands-on with taming birds, was that because I worked in animal hospitals and we had to towel everything back then. In fact, if people are interested, please let me know. I'd be happy to explain how things were in the old days. They were quite different, and how certain things got established, but they had to change throughout the years because of the importation, and then now just having hand-fed babies. But what I found was that as I held these birds, who would be horrified, they'd be terrified, they'd think that they were going to die because they'd been caught from the wild, they were adults. Now we're wrapping them in a towel, and somebody's poking them and prodding them, and people would clip their wings and their nails too short, and they'd have bleeding nails, so now we cause pain, and they're wondering. So what I would do when I was holding them, I would think, okay, how do macaws groom each other? And I would start grooming just with just the tip of one finger, and I would take a fingernail and just a tiny, I would take only the amount of space of the beak as they groom. So it would be this much for a macaw, just this much. Their beak would, and I used to start doing that with my fingernails, and I would do it back here. So their eyes are here, right? So if you're here, that's danger. You're going to grab them. They can't help it. It's just danger. But if a finger is coming up here from where another bird would be preening, because as you watch them, they'll tip their head down and they'll start under here. They don't like go at their face at first. And then as they groom, they start getting more space. So I started doing that. And as I was doing that, I could be holding the bird while the doctor's getting ready to examine them. They'd be screaming, screaming, screaming. And I wouldn't just scratch like this. I would nibble. Like I had nails then because I wasn't on the medication I am now, to take nails off. But I would nibble like a bird's beak, just that tiny amount in just that tiny little space. And I would start doing that. And I would start doing that. And it was so interesting because so many of them, I'd say over 50% of them would stop screaming at some point, look at me, but they'd look into my eyes. It wasn't like a fearful, like an, like a overwhelming thing. It would be like, did you just say you wanted to be my friend in my own language? And once I saw that shift in their eyes, because at first they'd be afraid when I touch them, because they're like, no touch has been good to them. No touch of a human has been good to them this time. But then as they started to feel me preen, and I would just talk to them softly, and I'd hold them against my heart. And I'd be very calm, and I'd just talk to them, and I have a deep voice, which helps. But it was interesting because you just see their demeanor stop. They'd look into my eyes, and then what would happen is probably about maybe 25% of them, the very first time would start to arch their neck a little bit, like, did you just say you wanted to be my friend? Because I wouldn't keep going. I would go and stop, like another bird. Go and stop. Go and stop. But I keep my hand close so it wasn't approaching all the time. So it would be like, go and stop, go and stop, go and stop. And I'd be going under the feathers, so they're not seeing my finger the whole time. And so it was interesting because the look on their face, that they would go and they'd turn their head like, and I'd say yes, and I'd preen the area that they presented. And I was always so happy when this happened, because I understood at that point that bird would no longer just know he was going to be killed and eaten. Yeah. Her little one probably doesn't think he's going to be killed and eaten because he's not wild, or wild caught more than likely. But one of the things, again, is knowing the grooming area. People tend to want to pet them like a dog or a cat. And for a little guy, that's a lot. That's, that would be like petting your dog or cat with a car or something with a sofa, and so we have to look at it that way from their point of view. And if you come to the preening areas that you watch on video, one of the things I used to suggest to my clients is when we had a bird that was otherwise a really nice bird, they just maybe didn't like being scratched around the head, I would start showing them how to do that grooming behavior, and often when I was working in the home with somebody with their bird, the bird would come around very quickly. But if it was a bird that was still kind of afraid, I'd say, you want to always go and stop, go and stop, go and stop. And then if it was still just didn't like it, what I would do then is I would have them save one of the stiffer feathers from their bird. So like a tail feather or a primary wing feather, even some of the secondary feathers, but one of them is a little stiffer. And then what I do is I'd have them start to use the feather and use it in exactly the same location where another bird would use it, would use its beak. And then as time went on, because what they find is all birds like to have their heads rubbed, but they just don't like it overdone, and they don't want a big hand coming over. And what they find is that if they did that touch and stop and just a little tickle and stop, if they can get down to the skin with it, just a little tiny space on a little one like a ringneck, a little tiny space and stop. And when you stop close to the location. You don't jerk away. If they did it with a feather, what we would do is start working their finger up the feather to eventually they would be using their fingernail. The feather would be inside of that area. And then they could scratch, because then the bird understood. And to me, that's just a real friendly, low key, slow as it goes kind of way to do it, and not for long sessions. I would do it for very short sessions. And just that little preen and stop, preen and stop, preen and stop, preen and stop. And then what you'll see, and just do that maybe 3 or 4 times, just 3 or 4 little preen and stop. Does that feel good? You know, and then when the bird begins to respond, then it's important to say, oh, does that feel good? You like scratch? You like being scratched? You want scratches? You know, that type of thing. So then they learn what scratches mean, or scritchies. You know, some people call them scritches, scratchies, scritchies. And then, you know, and then from there, the bird and the woman will begin to build this relationship where it'll be absolutely no pain on anybody's part. It'll be very comfortable, and the bird will be happy, and she'll be happy too.
Nice. See, there's a reason to save your bird's molted feathers. Another.
Yeah.
And so our next question comes from Frank. He has a 3.5-year-old blue-fronted, I'm going to say Amazon, blue front, that he got at 14 weeks old, and it's very fearful. The blue front steps up for walnut bits, exit the cage by himself, but not on the hand, and he targets well. Any suggestions for reducing fear for the blue front?
You know, this is one of those birds where I would suggest, if they wanted to write me, I still haven't answered the ones from last month. I'm being honest about that. It was Christmas season and everything was kind of crazy, and I had a little bit more work than usual to do around here. So I did not get to everybody where I'm going to get to them this week. That's the plan. But that's where I'd like to see pictures, because there's probably things in the environment that, it was a man's name, Frank?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. That Frank's not aware of. And this gets back to, I'm going to be repetitious, but I think one of the times before I spoke, either last time or the time before, where I was mentioning keeping part of the cage covered. Because what I find is, if you have a bird who's jumpy by nature and kind of skittish, and a lot of times that they're only jumpy and skittish because of their location. And it's nothing that the people aren't doing anything wrong. It's just the bird is in the wrong location. There's too much visual stimulus, and so, or stimuli, because they become stimulated by many things. Like if they're looking out over a window, or they're right in front of a window, but there's nowhere that they can visually escape. What will happen is that you'll find the bird will start to get real skittish, or they'll get cranky and start biting like a cranky child, because they can't relax. Mm-hmm. And so I would see if this bird is in a location where you want to keep him at least 3 feet from a path of traffic, where people go past his cage quickly, especially just inside of a doorway. So like from a hallway going into the living room or something, if the bird was in the living room and people are going past his cage within just inches or a foot or two, that's too close. Because it doesn't matter. You know, people say, well, gosh, my bird's tame, so he shouldn't, you know, he knows I'm not going to hurt him, so he shouldn't jump when this happened. And a couple of times, I haven't done this too frequently, but a couple of times I've been sitting very calmly and I go, boom, to the client, and they go, boom, like, you know, and I'll say, hey, it wasn't going to hurt you, but say, this is hardwired into a prey animal. If something is fast and it's moving close, and especially if it's big, you leave. And when you're in a cage, you can't leave.
Yeah.
And it's a visual thing. And so a lot of times the birds are getting too much visual impact where they cannot escape from it. And so that's why I like partially covering a cage where the bird always has an opportunity where they can be on their perch somewhere and step out of view of like where people are walking through and all this other stuff, or watching outside. Like when we first started, I'm watching a turkey vulture fly right past the window, and so, and the vulture is looking for dead things, but your bird doesn't know that. And, I know that Legolas, my bird, if I have the back office window uncovered completely, I have shades, then I open them partially. They're slant blinds. I got them specifically for that because I could open and shut them. But I find that if I left them open or if I open them up completely, that she gets really jumpy because I feed a lot of crows back there. And so I have like 21 crows that will come here for food. It's like I'm the crazy crow lady on the block. Anyway, one of my neighbors one day looks at me and he says, we've noticed that the crows that are standing in front of your house are always facing in the house, toward the house. I was like, oh, really? It's because I'm feeding them all the time. He was trying to say that, and I was acting dumb because I do feed them, and that's why. But anyway, getting back to the question, the stimulus, it's interesting. It doesn't take that much. Legolas is very secure. I have her on the far inside wall of my office. My office is a small room, but still I have her on the far, and it still makes her nervous looking out there and seeing those birds fly around. So we always have to leave the blinds somewhat going, but I also leave a bit of sheet hanging so that she always had a little cubby hole, an area where she can go, because people forget that when a bird is trying to take their nap and they take their siesta between noon and 2, sometime between there for about an hour and a half, they can, the reason they have thin eyelids is so that they can sense if there's like a predatory, like a bird or something going by that could hurt them. And so they still react to any type of movement. So that would be the first thing with that bird that I would see, because what I have found is that, especially if it's a hand-fed baby and it's been hatched in captivity, what I found is a lot of times if we just make him comfortable, then the rest of it just clicks into place. It's like, oh, thanks. He doesn't have to worry about his well-being anymore. So if Frank would write to me in care of Bird Talk,
Lafeber.
huh?
Lafeber.
Sorry, Bird Talk. 30 years of history, go down. Anyway, yeah, Lafeber. I should remember that name. If he could write to me, and if he has, or if he wants to just email me some photographs of where the bird's located, I'd like to know the setup of the room from the bird's perspective, from, the man standing in front of the cage and going like 360 in front of the cage, or almost 360, but from either side of the cage around. And then I'd like to look from the other area at the cage and see what it is. And then just give me kind of the lowdown on the history of the bird and all that. If he could do that, because this is one of those things where I think we may be able to tweak things for him, and the bird will be 1,000 times more comfortable, and then things will flow. Just getting on the hand and everything will be like, oh yeah, fine, because he won't have to worry about surviving.
Okay, those are good tips.
If I'm wrong, if it's not yet, because I'd have to say there is a small percentage, or there are a small percentage of birds, but there is a small percentage that will actually they'll just be more flighty, just like people. They'll just, and so with them, we work with them, but we work with them differently. Like you'd work with someone who is high strung with a short attention span or whatever, very nervous. You work with those types of people differently than you would someone who's very focused and there, and not afraid.
Yeah, different personalities. That's a good point. So then our next question comes from Sue, and she has a 5-month-old peach-faced lovebird named Kiwi that has a habit. He has a habit of biting her neck while he's perched on her shoulder. What can she do to deter that painful habit? And then she had a secondary question about, is it safe to let my lovebird nibble on my lawn grass and shrubbery? So,
Okay. I'll do the lawn grass and shrubbery thing first. I really don't like to do that because you can never tell. I remember, California, we're more concerned with like pesticides and things. And I remember when I lived in the Midwest full time for several years, I remember in the springtime, the first time because I'd never been exposed to like snow and winter and spring, stuff. And so what I noticed one day is I opened the windows like I would in California, and I just got this blast of pesticide smell from my neighbor's houses, because we didn't use it at ours because I'm from California. But I really don't trust what's out there. Also, if there's a lot of wild birds around, they can carry disease that her little guy can get. And so if she would like to give him grass to eat, I would suggest getting like some greens that are made for birds, the seeds, and just planting those in a little thing and giving him some of that, because the greenery is good for him, or giving him a little chard, to eat or something. Greens are good for him, but I just don't trust something from the yard. There's too many things, or other animals could poop there. Like raccoons and possums and squirrels and things are pooping and peeing all over the place, and that's fine out there, but you don't want your bird eating that. So, I would say no on that one. Now, the other one, the pinching thing, part of that's just a preening behavior. And basically when birds preen, again, watching them preen, what they'll do is they don't just, they're not just like taking the keratin sheath off of new feathers. That's just one activity. They also they do that, and they make sure that all the barbs and the barbules on the feathers are perfect, on whomever they're grooming. They're doing that. But they also pick off like dead skin, mites, lice, whatever else they might have in the wild. But they pick these things off, and they pick off dry skin and peel it away. And they pick off little bits of the keratin sheath that may have fallen against the skin. They pick that off, and they scrape the skin clean too. So it's not just for the feathers. So she might look into getting a couple of turtlenecks. No, but I would probably give him something to chew on. I mean, even if she were to pin something to her that he likes to, like a toy, if he has a toy that he likes to nibble on, or something, not something that's going to create any type of like lint or filaments that he could get caught in his crop, anything that he could pull out like that. You don't want something like that, but something, it's kind of just a little nervous habit right now with him. And I even just a kerchief, an inexpensive cowboy scarf, she'll, look cowgirlish for a while.
Bandana,
but I think that, and then as she wears that and he doesn't have that, then she can give him a toy or something to kind of keep, it's kind of a busy beak thing. They're lovebirds are a bit more hyper. They're cute as heck. And they're just kind of like always kind of going. And so he needs something that he can nibble on. And for him, this is just being affectionate to her, but it's also keeping his beak busy. So, if she wants to pin a little toy, we've done that before, because sometimes, again, since she doesn't have feathers, that he has to take off, or real peely skin, I'm assuming that he has to take off. And then from there, he'll get focused on there, and she can, again, you praise him when he's doing that, oh, you got your toy. And then she could just put a kerchief around her neck. So she doesn't have to always be, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that, because that's a reward. He's got your attention, your undivided attention, when you keep telling him no for this or whatever, pulling him away. But if he's playing with a toy, you have your neck covered where he can't get to anything else, and he starts to fiddle with this little toy that's on your shoulder. It can even be just a little bell or something, but just something, you're gonna play with that toy, look at you. Did you get that toy? And then when he does, oh, what a good boy. And so he gets attention for playing with that instead of just pinching. I've had birds do that before, and it's like, ooh, you're like, ow, little tiny little pinchies, but
It just don't birds, they kind of, young birds, I'm thinking like just like you would with a toddler or even like a young dog,
exactly.
they go through that beakiness phase, right?
They do, and for about the first year well, unless it's a really big bird, like a hyacinth or something, then they go through a longer period. But yeah, for about the first year, he's still a baby. He's still a youngster learning the ways of the world. And so by redirecting his behavior to something that he can chew on, or it can even be like a piece of cloth that would be tied through a toy. So let's say you have a toy that's got a lot of these little cloth things tied through them. And if you do use cloth with a bird, you'd never want to use a synthetic fabric. You always want to use like cotton. The reason for that, 100% cotton. And then you want to make sure that, if there's any dye on it, that it's not harmful. But that's why I was saying the kerchiefs, because those are pretty safe. You launder those up and, but the thing is that with artificial fibers like nylon, polyester, anything like that, what happens is if they don't tend to break off tiny little bits of it, it tends to be so strong that it stays longer. They can end up with an impaction from swallowing that, in which how do I describe it? It would be like a piece of it could get caught and go down into his digestive tract, and trying to get that out is nearly impossible without especially once it hits the lower intestines or the stomach. It's really hard to get it out without killing the bird, even for a veterinarian. So cotton has a tendency to just sort of pill up and kind of, if they do swallow, you don't want them to swallow threads of anything, but if they do happen to swallow some, it'll just usually stay a little bit and go on through with no harm. If he's starting to do that, then you remove that toy and you give him another toy. It can even be a similar cloth, but maybe you want to then tie it into knots instead, hard knots. So he just has it there. He can chew on it or beak it, like you were saying. And then that's one of the other things with the larger birds, since we're kind of covering everybody, with the larger birds, I would only give them when I had them, but I would actually get what a friend used to call a baby plug, a pacifier. Oh. But I would just put it on my finger and hold it, and just let the baby kind of no. But for somebody as tiny as him, I don't know what would be that small and of a similar consistency. But if they know of something, great, and I'd like to know what it is so I can inform people. But yeah, it's that mouth thing, yeah.
Okay, that's it. The baby can live it. So Elizabeth asks, should I be concerned with a senior Amazon who sometimes rests horizontally on his perch instead of perching upright?
What kind of Amazon does it say?
Doesn't say what species.
Okay.
Just an older Amazon likes to rest horizontally on the perch instead of standing on it.
Okay. If he's always rested horizontally, then I would say that he probably has some, this is just what he's done his whole life. Maybe he had a problem when he was younger, whatever, and he compensated. Maybe he fell down too frequently when he was sleeping. Maybe he wasn't able to grip well or whatever from an accident or something, and maybe he would fall off, and so he decided to sleep this way. If he's an older bird, you need to go to if you can find a board certified avian veterinarian to look at him and make sure. They do get arthritis just like people do. And sometimes the older birds, like my Lagolas, ended up having a stroke one time, and it was after she had been flown out to California because I'd gotten very ill. And we had a friend fly her out with her on her lap. It was not under the plane, but I've put her perches very low. She might want to try that for the perch for her bird. I would see the mobility of the bird. Does it seem to be, is its mobility impaired at all? Can it still stand with one foot, eat with the other? These are things that you need to look at that would tell you that, gosh, you know what? He used to do that, and now he's not doing that anymore. And if that's the case, then I'd say that there's something going on, and it might be just a thing like birds will get mini strokes every once in a while where they're a little off and then they're okay, but they're never quite as steady. So boy, that's something where I'd have a veterinarian just take a peek, but it would have to be somebody who's been around with birds for a long time. So they would just, or sees a lot of birds, so that they would understand that, yes, this might just be an older bird with arthritis, and you might want to pad the perches and, do things like that, and put the bottom of the cage up a little higher so that if they happen to fall, that they're falling 2 inches and not 3 feet,
Yeah.
So, and if she has further questions, she again can write to me, care of Lafeber.com. We can see what, if there's just, it might just be an idiosyncrasy. I have seen idiosyncratic birds, and just like people,
Yeah, they're unique, right? Some are just
Yeah, that's it.
So then we have a question from Stephen. Says that his cockatiel panics when he loses sight of me. Since I cannot be physically present with him 24/7, how can I calm his anxiety?
Okay. This is another good subject, because as the worldwide pandemic starts to wind down, there's going to be a lot of people going to work, and their birds aren't accustomed to this. This is where it's important for him interacting with his bird, sort of like when we were talking about the baby lovebird, where you praise him for playing with a toy on the shoulder here next to the woman's, so he's not chewing on the neck, with her with a kerchief on, so he can't. But have him start, even though he can still reach the kerchief, have him play with a toy here instead. I would do the same thing with his bird. I would start praising it for playing with different objects. I would also see if his bird likes having a television on. I have found that to be so helpful throughout the years. I mean, that's the good old standby, is having a TV on, because then the bird feels like there's somebody else there. And when you have a bird, and again, I hate to be repetitious, but it's because I would say in a huge number, not an occasional number of the birds, they're in a location or a situation where they don't feel as safe as they could be. Mm-hmm. And so if, again, you keep them more than 3 feet from a path of traffic, give them a visual hiding area where they can stand on their perch. And like if there's too much visual stuff going on through a window or whatever, maybe even closing the shades, or whatever, that's what you want to do. He wants to go inside the bird's cage in his head and look around and see what his bird is looking at. And then see if the bird is within 3 feet of a path of traffic. Even if the man lives alone, you're still like yelling boo at them as you walk by. And so, look at these different situations and see if his bird is maybe just becoming kind of, what's the word? Not frightened, but let's just say overly wary. Yeah. That there's too much going on visually for it when or it's quiet, and then just when the man walks by, it's like really quick and startles him. So that will always maintain that kind of little adrenaline lift there, where it's just a little too much adrenaline. I would look at that first, because a lot of times, again, we want to get into the big problem solving. And we should look at that part first. Make sure the bird feels safe and secure. Again, if he wants to send, email a couple of photos where the bird's situated, the bird's schedule, how he handles them, whatever. And then from there, once we know that the bird feels comfortable in his environment, then I would set up where he would tell the bird he's going to go out. But when he goes out, save one treat, a treat that that bird just loves. I mean, just one thing that he adores. And then that would be the treat that he gets when the man leaves. So it would be, you know, again, you don't want to give him these huge treats where it's like eating a card table, but you know, you give him several pieces of something that keep him occupied. If there's something that he loves to eat, like a certain type of nut or a hard bread or like a certain type of nutriberry or something, what you can do is give him those, because I like to give the bird something that he only gets during that when you're going. So leaving becomes a positive thing.
Mhm.
And that he ends up saying, oh boy, I wish you'd leave so I can have my nutriberry, or I can have whatever. If he eats nutriberries regularly again, then I would look for, if he's on pellets, it's easier because then he can give the nutriberries a treat. Or if he's on nutriberries, he could try the pellets as a treat, or he could try, just like I said, even a big chunk of apple, you know, well, not huge, but you know, a chunk of apple for him, just something, if he likes apple. I mean, he's a cockatiel, so, but something that's going to keep him busy for a while, not something that he'll have swallowed before the man gets out the door. Not something that he thinks is really good. And that's what with cockatiels, I think some of these grainy crackers that are just health crackers, and you know, that's a good idea because it you know, it's something the size of a Triscuit. No, not even a Triscuit. What are those little things? Those wheat thin, you know, like a wheat thin, yeah, a wheat thin sized thing or something, no larger than that, but something that takes him a little time that he really likes chewing on. So that would be the size I would give him of whatever it was. So if it was a little hard health cracker or something, but the size of, you know, something small. And then if it's something the bird really loves, what he'll find is the bird will be quite comfortable with him leaving.
Okay. And just so with cockatiels, especially because they whistle a lot too.
I
Do you
love them.
recommend or suggest, like, if you're in another room and your cockatiels like whistling, like, where are you? Like a contact call back, or is that going to set you up for always having to whistle back to your cockatiel whenever you're in a different room?
You know, it kind of depends on the bird, because some birds it works out really well. Like always with my own birds, I was able to say, okay, you know, like if they got too noisy, I'd always say, hey, you guys knock it off, and they'd be quiet. You know, it's like, oops, sorry, mom, because I just let them know there's a certain level. I don't take it beyond that. They have to vocalize, but not, they don't have to scream. They can chatter and talk and do all kinds of stuff. And so the thing is that I have, though, like if I've been gone all day or whatever, I would come home and I'd say hi to the birds and I love them. What I would do is I'd give them a treat or whatever, just giving you kind of a whole overview of how I would do it. I give everybody a treat when I left. I give everybody a treat when I came home. And then if I would have like one bird, like a client who has one bird, again, you want to make sure the bird is somewhere he feels safe, because sometimes the calling is because they're in a situation where they get these little bursts of adrenaline from feeling, you know, from surprises, visual surprises usually. You want to make sure he's secure. And then once he's secure, what you do is, I have found, as long as you don't keep doing it over and over and over again, and you remember to walk back in before he squawks again, you can say, no, it's okay. I'm going to be there in just a couple minutes. And then if he screams again, you can be just quiet.
Mm.
And then when he's quiet, then you walk in. You walk in after he's been quiet. And sometimes it's like, if you have birds that scream a lot, sometimes it's like a timing thing. You have to kind of like wait inside the other side of the doorway, you know, because they give you a nanosecond of quiet.
Yeah.
But you come in during the quiet and you go, oh, you were quiet. That was so nice. See, you understood. I told you that I was going to be in the other room, and I told you I was going to come right back, didn't I? And I did. And you talk to them like you would a small child, doing that so they hear each word, and they, oh, he's telling me something about leaving, you know. And then, oh, and he said I was good because I was quiet. And then what you do is when the bird is being quiet, when his owner is there, that he can say, "You're such a good baby. You're such a good boy. I love when you're quiet like this. You're just so quiet and nice." You know, that type of thing. So he hears the word quiet, quiet, quiet while he's being quiet. Even gets a little treat for being a quiet, good boy. And then have a treat available. I mean, like have it right there so that when the bird, that calls out to the person says, "I'll be there in just a couple minutes. You be quiet. I'll be there in just a couple minutes." You have to come out within a couple minutes or even less. I usually have people come in less. And then you bring a treat. "Oh, you were quiet. What a good boy." Do you see? Because otherwise, all they do is the bird learns to say, "Shut up," or "Be quiet," or "Stop," you know, or "Stop yelling," which is my favorite. You go in, you hear birds saying that, you walk in, you go, "Well, I know what the problem is." You know, you've been rewarding them the whole time. So yeah, so that's how you would do it. You want to make sure he feels secure first, and then do that. And then when he's gone, you know, like all day, whatever, the bird will get more and more comfortable with being quiet. He may find that leaving on a radio, like a talk station, doesn't have to be loud, but just where the bird feels like there's other flock people around.
Okay, that's good. Good suggestion there. Find a radio station that your bird likes. So let's see. So we have our last question of the day comes from Stacy. And Stacy has a kakariki, which isn't too a little more unusual for the companion. And a kakariki who follows me everywhere like a dog, but acts like a cat when it comes to getting petted. One time I caught him in a towel, and as I done multiple times, and he dropped his tail. I know this is fear behavior, but there were no indications of fear at all, and we had done this 1,000 times before. How can I tell if it's going to happen again?
Okay. Well, cats, they're just a different bird. I love them. They're funny as heck. They're smart. They're funny. They're unpredictable in a funny way. You never know what they're going to think of next. They're like the bright kid where you go, "Oh my gosh, you know, this kid's going to be smarter than me in 5 years," you know? And so anyway, but they're kind of like a little crazy. They're sort of like the crazy relative that everybody loves, but they don't, you know, it's like, you know, but you know, so you never know quite how it's like they process things faster. I think the closest thing would be like me. ADD. I'm ADD, and I think of Cacarikas as being ADD birds, and because everything kind of goes in and out very quickly, and so as far as like toweling him just to scratch him, I wouldn't do that. I mean, if he has to be toweled for grooming or something, I certainly understand. But I would probably in that particular situation, because they are very smart, I would probably use training in that situation instead of just teaching. I would train, you know, for him to sit there and let her touch him and do things like that. And that's where you would use this successive approximation, where, you know, you do something and you don't have to use a clicker. I never like using a clicker. I just say, "Good, or good bird, or good baby, or good boy," or "That was wonderful, good." You know, just that type of thing. They'll go with that just fine. You don't have to use a clicker. We used them in the 70s at Universal Studios, and we did them for performing birds, which is different. It's a whole different setup and everything. But for a pet, no. And I would try the feather thing too. If she wants to try to touch him, I would try that feather thing that I had described for the preening, you know. So where you take the feather and you use it as a preening tool. And a lot of times with a bird like that, again, I think a lot of it has to do with the kakariki being so just sort of hyper. And I think for them to like hold still, I think is it's more stressful for them, you know, to kind of be confined and it is, you know, it's like an ADD kid. And so, you know, it really in hyperactive. So, I would try the feather thing with him and try to avoid the towel as much as possible. Yeah, because dropping his tail, unless there was something else that went on, it's kind of surprising. I would also look and see, make sure that wherever he is caged is an area that's secure. He's not in the path of traffic. He has a little area where he can step out visually if he needs to rest. Because this is one thing, when I see a hyperactive bird and they're in a situation where they can't stop, they can't rest because there's too much movement or whatever. I see a bird that you really can't work because you can't get them to focus on what you want them to do. And so if you make them feel secure in the place that they have to sleep and all that, then I find that then you have a lot more freedom with what you can do with them. Because a tail drop, yeah, that means he was highly stressed. And if it was her handling him, and it doesn't completely make sense to me. So there's something else in the environment that's stressing him and also making him not want to be touched. But again, cats are just a different breed. And they're cool. I mean, I love them. They're just little guys that just, that they're all like always going.
Always on the go, right? Well, that was, okay. So that's interesting. Just a real quick question. I just was wondering, because you were talking about the cage and how that's an area that they should, always feel safe and secure in. If you have a bird that, let's say you're trying to get them used to you, petting them or anything like that, would it always be a preference that you take them outside the cage to try to pet them? Or is there ever an instance where you might like try to do the feather thing while they're in their cage, or does that defeat the purpose of them feeling safe?
It depends on the bird. It depends on the bird, because what I have found is that when we were working with wild birds, there were times we did have to work them inside the cage. And because, and we had to be careful how we did it. We had to be careful when we did it. We had to set them up ahead of time in a way that they did not have any surprises, any nasty surprises. And where we did not want to get them all worked up and frightened and everything. And then what we would do is try the feather grooming thing in there. And then what we would do is start to just get them used to our hands being around them inside the cage. Like putting a hand on the perch or something while you were feeding them, but next to them, but just putting it, like you put you're putting the food in there, whatever, but you have your hand on the perch. Sometimes it start out with one finger, then we go to two fingers, but until the bird wasn't over here screaming on the far side. But then they learn, oh, she's going to be done. And, they'd keep photog, reassure them and tell them what they're giving the bird, even if it was wild. I'm giving you this and this and this. Wanted the bird to learn that interaction, that I'm going to pay attention to you. And I'm your friend. I'm giving this to you. And so the bird starts to learn our inflections, what's our natural sound, because they didn't know what we were. So they know what our natural sounds were when we were being benign, when we were friendly and calm. But most of the time, I like to get the bird out of the cage. I like to draw them out and then work them on a perch. And especially if it's somebody who's just kind of like, I prefer to stay inside right now, or if it's somebody who just likes to climb out by themselves, I always like to at least teach them to climb on my arm from inside the cage. Because if there's an emergency, like my birds, sometimes I'll put my hand up when they're on the perch, and if they walk away, they're telling me, no, I don't want to come out right now. Most of the time, that's fine. I'll say, okay, and I shut the door and latch it. Problem with the wild bird is that was a reward for the wild bird, And so with a domestic bird that wants to come out, I like to train them to go to the hand, because what my birds, if they say, no, I really want to stay in here, I want to take a nap, or I just want to hang out, or I want to eat, I respect that. But they also know, because I used to live down in an area that, we got evacuated every few years for fires. And they also know, I say, no, you've got to get on now. Boom, get on immediately, every one of them. because they would know that that tone meant this is business, you know, where it's not negotiable. So if you can, it's always best to have them come out and then put them on a little perch or something, or put them somewhere like on your knee, and then offer your hand to pick them up. And, you know, or you can use your knee, you know, if it's a bird who's used to people and stuff, he's just feeling funny about the hand. Also, people have to watch how they're holding their hands. What I have found is that some people, I have real tiny bones. And so macaws and things, I have to hold my arm like this because there's not enough of them to hang on this way. They feel uneasy because it's too narrow. Mm-hmm. So you have to look, or even when I was heavier, you know, you have to be careful. The smaller birds, if they're here, they're going to slip and fall. So you have to see where it's comfortable for the bird. Often what I find is that people are addressing the bird. I mentioned this, I think the one before, but the talk I gave last month, I think. But when you're approaching a bird, make sure it's not like this, not poking toward the bird, but sweeping toward it gently, and just toward, like offering this like this, but very, very, so they can see it coming. It's not like you're startling them. Yeah. So to do that, and what I've found is a lot of times people can't get them to step on their hand just because they're moving too fast, or they do that and then they come out and then they move their hand like this. And with the bird, you know, I mean, all of a sudden the bird's like, he's trying to, like a log roller, you know, around your hand, you know, or they're doing this, which feels very insecure. The bird has to know that you're secure. You have to hold that arm absolutely still, because when he steps on, you have to actually compensate. If it's a larger bird, you have to compensate a bit to show him that I'm not going to drop you. So like if a large bird gets on, your hand would go down by this much, especially if you're a woman, go down by this. What you do is you compensate. As he's stepping on, you pull up a bit. And then that also teaches him then to release the other foot. Then you keep your hand in that position and you bring him out and you stay at this position. And then if you're going to present him to a perch, you're still in this position and you present him to the perch, you know, whichever way he would be coming onto it. But you do the same thing. Then you drop your hand down lower so he steps up. They always want to step up. So you drop your hand lower so he steps up. And then you wait until he takes the second foot off before you drop your hand away. You wait for him to be completely on. So that's why I give so many alternatives here, because I can't see what's going on. When I can see, a lot of times it would be like, oh, well, you just moving too quickly, or when he goes to get on your hand, you're wobbling like this. They hate that. They hate that. And I don't blame them. You would too, you know. So it's looking at the world from the bird's point of view, seeing how they are, and then from there doing what's comfortable for them. And they're always going to want to go up instead of down. So always present up, and don't present to both feet at the same time if you're pushing against the chest. People will do that where the bird's standing like this, they're pushing against the chest of the bird, wanting him to get up, and they're pushing both legs back. And I tell them the bird is not going to, you know, he can't hop, he can't do anything. You can't, he's just hanging onto the perch tighter too. So you have to watch, and you have to like angle the hand toward him so that you're gently pushing against whichever foot you've noticed that he steps up first. They're like we are, they're left-handed, right-handed. So if he's a left-handed bird and he steps with his little left foot first, then you have to gently place the pressure against the left foot, leaving the right foot like this. And once what he'll do, he'll actually stay here, and then he'll step up here or here, or if it's a very light pressure, he'll still be on the perch, then he'll step up here, and then you lift your hand gently and he'll go like that. So it's kind of all those pieces to make him feel comfortable. And, you know, and again, they can write to me if there's additional stuff. Videos help so much, because then I can say, you know, all right.
Well, that was a good question to end on. That was a really good one. So I'm going to announce today's big winner. And this is going to be Luis C. So Luis, you are going to win a bag of the Lafeber tropical fruit pellets, as well as a bag of food that you're of your choice. So you'll be getting an email.
Luis.
Yeah, congratulations. Hopefully that makes your weekend and your birds. So so congratulations. And Chris, once again, some fabulous information, and can't wait to have you on again, talk more about the heart-to-heart part of bird companionship. So thank you.
They are our hearts.
And I just want to remind people that next Friday we are back on with Dr. Tom Tolley with Ask the Vet. So tune in next Friday. And you know what? All these webinars are on the Lafeber YouTube channel. So if you missed our webinars, our prior ones, check it out on YouTube, Lafeber's YouTube channel. You can see them there. So with that said, Chris, once again, thank you for
and I'd like to thank everybody for showing up. I really value the time that you take out of your day to listen to bird behavior, bird interactions. It isn't just behavior, it's more interactions. But I thank you all so much. And thank you for being good bird moms and dads. You know, I just love that. They fill our lives with so much happiness.
Yes, and it's nice to have this, this bird community online. I mean, this is fabulous. Like, kind
Yeah.
of feel all, together in this. So,
Yes.
well, on that note, just wanted to again thank you, Chris, and thank you for everyone who tuned in today. And we will see you hopefully our next webinar. In the meantime, all the best to you and your flock, and be safe and have a great weekend. Bye, guys. Bye, Chris.
Thank you.